I'm Sam Taggart with Can't Knock This, host of the first ever Door-to-Door Con, bringing professional collaboration to the direct selling and door-to-door industry. Go register your seat for our event, January 2018 at doortodoorcon.com. I'm here with Peter Swensen, the legend.
Woo!
Okay, so those of you guys, I'm Sam Taggart with D2D Podcast, and Peter is the divisional vice president. He's one of the divisional vice presidents of Northstar Home or Security Smart Home.
Northstar Direct.
Northstar Direct,
yes.
Yeah. And we're here in Arizona in his office. It's an awesome office right by ASU, right?
Yeah.
And half the time I don't even know where I'm at. But, I flew down here. I figured, connect with one of the beasts. He's been in door-to-door for over 8 years now. And he has a really unique background because he started in books.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, wait, people still sell books? And I think it's kind of a cool...
160 years they've been selling books.
Yeah, and it's still a huge staple. I mean, how many reps do you think they have?
The European division is growing faster than the American division, but I think there's still around 2,000 or 3,000 students, usually college students, that will knock on doors and sell books every summer. So I did that for 4 years before my 8 years in alarms and smart home.
Yeah, and I think that's 12 years of business. Yeah, so I mean, a giant in the space. He's been super successful. And has a unique approach because a lot of us are all cut from the same cloth, where you're cut from a different cloth. You're not the Utah, you're not the, alarm. You came from this regimen of the book structure,
yeah.
And then you've applied that to, how you run your business, I'm assuming, today, and some of the cool principles. So I think this will be kind of a cool, diverse podcast. So those that are listening, just a different perspective, a different viewpoint of the world, but I'm excited. So we're going to talk about a few things, leadership and leadership development and your favorite principles on about leadership.
Yeah.
We're going to talk on schedule and, the scheduling in the off season and the season, because a lot of times we just get caught in the whirlwind and diving into how do you stay on track in the recruiting season to really ramp up for the summer, and then
maximizing your opportunity while you're in direct sales.
Yeah.
Or whatever time that you're doing this, maximizing what that time is worth.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people take it for granted. They look back 3 years and then they're like, shoot, I didn't realize how good I had it.
Yeah.
And so we'll dive into those things. So if you're watching this and you know Peter, give him a little thumbs up, give him some love, share this, because there's other people, or tag some friends that need to be watching this live. Or if you're listening to the podcast, feel free to comment or stuff like that on here. Things that you take. I always say give a thumbs up when you find a nugget, right? So if you're listening and you're like, wow, that was a nugget, give it a little thumbs up, give it some love. So let's dive into this. I want to hear kind of the backstory. 12 years ago, you are how old?
12 years ago, I am 19.
19. How'd you get into this whole book thing?
Cousin recommended me to his buddy that he played hockey with in college.
Okay.
And I got a phone call. I went to the overview session in this little dungeon of a library at the little liberal arts school I went to in Minnesota, small Catholic school, college, and saw something I wanted. I knew that I was different. I knew that I was looking for a way to showcase my ability in the business world, and I didn't want to do what a lot of my friends were doing. So I sold books, and it was a very intense schedule, and the schedule is pretty much the same today with that company, Southwestern, as it was 12 years ago. But during the summer kicks off with a week-long sales school. So everybody goes to Nashville. It's a 5-day, 12 hours a day training event.
What? The sales school kickoff.
Yeah, it's 12 hours a day, 5 days, and that gets you ready for the summer, which is 6 days a week, 13 and a half hours a day. So
anybody that's knocking and you're like, I've been out here for 5 hours and I want to kill myself, try 13 hours.
Yes.
13 hours, do the math. What time do you start and what time do you end?
It was, you started, you had to knock on your first door. The agreement was by 7:59, before 8 a.m. every day, you're on a door. And there's some days when I hadn't made it to my area, so I'd have to pull over in a random neighborhood and knock just to stay with integrity. And then you work until 9:30. At least 12 years ago, it was 7:59 to 9:31 p.m. So it was at least 13 and a half hours every day, 6 days a week. And I did that for 4
I've
summers.
never knocked a day like that in my life.
But you actually, so it's better than that. You wake up at 6, so there's this universally agreed upon schedule. not required, but really agreed upon. You wake up at 6 a.m. and the first thing you do is take a cold shower.
Wow.
So you go as, I was sold up in Michigan and Pennsylvania and where it's really cold water. And so you've got the ice cube water coming down the shower. You jump in, scream, do a little dance, jump out of the shower. Your roommates, because you live with families. You live in like their spare bedroom or their basement or their attic with 2 or 3 roommates. And so everybody's jumping out, doing the quick shower, packing their lunch, getting out, doing breakfast together, jumping in their car and driving to their area. And then you work solo all day, 6 days a week like that. And then on Sundays, we drove, half an hour to 3 hours to do a big, like, statewide sales meeting. And that would be our one, I guess some people would call it correlation. Here we call it a pregame, but that would be our one big.
So it's one meeting a week.
One meeting a week. That's it. Yeah.
And how were you managed during the week? Like, how did your leadership make sure that you were actually sticking in integrity? Like, we
were scrupulous about our sales stats, so we tracked everything that we did. Every call, every minute that we knocked was tracked. Every call, every transition, every demo. We call them demos, door demos, sit-down demos. We tracked all of it, and then those metrics were reported that night. 12 years ago through a phone tree. So no texting, no websites, just a phone call reporting stats to somebody, and then they'd give you a few minutes of coaching based off the numbers. And
that's cool.
That's how the business operates. Still, mainly.
And you gotta give it. I mean, that's amazing. That like the fact that you're like, man, I'd pull over if I wasn't gonna make it and be in integrity.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like, I'm in integrity. Like, what does that mean?
And I don't even know if I would have said it that way a long time, like back then. But now being integrity, it's simple, right? If you say you're going to do something, being integrity is doing it. I mean, if you haven't made it to your area and there's a house there and you're not going to make it to your area, you don't drive on the road until it's after 8 o'clock and now you didn't do it. Like, you pull over in time to go find the house. I mean, I remember there were some nights at like 9:45 at night, I hadn't got all my demos, so I'd go to a gas station. And obviously you're not going to get a sale this way for the most part, but I'd go to a gas station and say, hey, here's my books. I sell these. I explain them for 30 seconds, say, sorry, humor me. And at least I showed it to 30 people that day. That was our number, 30 every day.
So you had a minimum demo?
30 every day, every single day.
And what's considered a demo? Like,
demo is showing somebody, I can't remember exactly, but essentially showing them the books and demoing the books, what they do. Kids' books, study guides.
That's awesome. No, and I'm excited.
That's old school.
As we get into leadership, though, like the principles of how they kept accountability and how they did their phone trees and how they convinced 3,000 college kids to work 85-hour weeks, and you know what I mean? That's impressive.
Southwestern's heritage, it started, I believe, after the Civil War. Veterans sold Bibles to pay for college, and Nashville, Tennessee, which is where it's based out of, was the southwest part of America.
Okay.
It's 160 some odd years old.
That is probably the most historical.
They're the
door
oldest.
knocker.
They're the oldest direct selling company in America.
It goes them. Then probably Kirby. They're 110.
There you go.
Cutco's probably up there if you count. And then a lot of people. It's funny because there's like people like Vivint. They're like, we're the biggest sales force in the world. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? There's other companies that people don't
They've been doing it for a long time.
That they have such staples, and I'm sure that they're so regimented. They figured out the nuts and bolts of like, this works, this doesn't work, adapt. And it's just refining and finding.
Yeah, the smart home space is still kind of in the midst of the end of the introductory Wild West heyday phase.
Figuring it out.
Yeah, it's transitioning now, I think.
That's cool. So what was kind of the transition into the smart home space? Like, that's been now 8 years. Like,
Well, my story is, from my fourth summer, I graduated college. I was a full-time recruiter. Oddly enough, as a full-time recruiter, when you sell books, that means you're working like 50 hours a week recruiting, every week of the month for about 4 months. So it's second semester of college, and during that time, 50 hours a week, I recruited a whopping total of one person.
50 hours a week for 4 months.
One that started the summer, and 0 that finished the summer. She quit. So that was a humbling, growth-filled experience. But I learned I was not a great recruiter when I was 21. And then I moved to Arizona. So one of my very good friends, and actually I'll go back real briefly. After my third summer of selling books, I said, okay, I'm done, and I left, and I did some other stuff. And then later that year, I was selling windows for a while. One of my friends had told me, look, I want to start a business with you, but you need to learn how to recruit. Like, I want to work with you, but after you know how to recruit.
Okay.
And so I decided to come back to sell books and recruit so I could learn how to recruit. which
Wow.
I may or may not have accomplished, but it was unique because for me, direct sales was always about who I got to be on the other side of it. And it started even back then when I was not as good. Sales-wise, I always did great, but in recruiting, it wasn't there. So I spent 2 years with him in Arizona, moved from Minnesota down here to Arizona, working with little startup companies, and none of them, that sounds sexy, but it wasn't that sexy. They were like dinky call centers, and one of them was practically a Ponzi scheme with the guy that owned it just funneling money the wrong way. So I learned a lot about what types of leaders I couldn't work with.
Yeah.
And then I kind of stumbled into an opportunity. One of my roommates at the time had sold books, and he had started selling alarms. That was before smart home was really a conversation, and convinced me to go and give it a shot at least. I was about ready to go sell insurance back in Minnesota, door to door. So I'm like, if I'm willing to knock on doors, I might as well try it in the beautiful desert as opposed to the Midwest and the tundra where I'm from. It was like -50 there last week. -51 with wind chill.
So if you're knocking in Utah or you're knocking in it's cold. It's like, go knock in Minnesota.
Yeah, it was even worse. But
oh man.
So I didn't. Anyways, I tried alarms. I discovered that there's the schedule and the finances of the business created a possibility for a career, longevity and structure and stability that I had never seen with books. And I went out, had a tremendously successful first year, jumped into management the next year, started learning more hard lessons, which I think we're going to talk about, but just more hard lessons about leadership and what it really means to lead people and the consequences.
You weren't the natural. It sounds like you weren't the natural recruiter.
I
weren't the natural leader that
I think
you recruited.
I've always been naturally charismatic.
Yeah.
But I was a dork in high school, and still a little bit of a dork now, but I've embraced it. I've learned how to embrace it. But really, it was. I remember at one point, my first year recruiting, the owner of the company that I was working with had suggested to the guy that I was partnered with as kind of co-managers that he dump me because I wasn't doing any of the recruiting, which was kind of true. I wasn't the one making the calls. I wasn't the one getting out there and finding the prospects. I was a very stable leader beyond that, but it still wasn't as developed as I needed to be. So we ended up recruiting 30 or so alumni that had used to work at Southwestern that sold books. It was a really tremendous group of individuals. And we had just had some enormous success, and we certainly overpromised to a fault what these guys, we just thought it would be as simple as walking in and experiencing the same thing as us. And what I hadn't anticipated is that I wasn't as developed of a leader to give them the same experience in this industry as if it was books or something, right? I was new to the industry. I was new to the products. And ultimately, we had a really good experience in terms of the averages that those guys earned. Like, it was a great experience. It was fun. But at the end of that season, almost all of them were ready to move on and do something else.
Really?
Yeah, it kind of boggled me. In fact, that whole year, my first 2 years in leadership, I don't work with anybody that I had recruited in those 2 years.
You just had to recycle year after year.
Yeah, it's a consequence of not having been developed as a leader to the extent that they needed, and that's
and let's speak to
humbling.
that a little bit more. Yeah, and it's so funny because so many people think like, oh, I'm going to become a divisional vice president and someday, and I'm just like, you got to be a natural. You got to be this like, I don't know, I'll never make it. But I'm sure there were moments, like humbling moments, where you're going home and crying on the pillow and just saying, what the freak? Nobody likes me, or what am I doing wrong? Like this unworthy feeling and the shame that you probably felt was like almost detrimental.
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist. I think that's definitely one of I'm always seeing the blue skies, probably to a fault, right? To a fault that I was less responsible with my own development for a while, like intentional development, and I think I thought I was doing more and providing more to the guys I work with than I may have actually been.
Yeah, there's a difference between your reality and what's actually like being communicated.
And not that it wasn't valuable, but these guys were. Everybody probably is familiar with John Maxwell and the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and I think number one is law of the lid. And I wasn't aware that I was here, and they were basically in the same range. Some a little more, some a little less, but I wasn't providing the type of value to them that would keep them around long term. and have them be excited to stick around long term and learn from me and grow with me. And I remember one specific scenario, a guy, really a dear friend at that point in time. We had, by nature of us both having sold books, and then he came the next year after I had done alarms and worked with me there for 2 years. And after the second year, we had this conversation on my porch. I remember in Phoenix on our little, 1-bedroom loft thing, and we're on the back porch, and he's telling me that he wants to work with another leader. He's like, I'm done. I love you, but I'm done growing with you. Like, I'm not getting value from our relationship the way that I want to get one from my leader, which was, it took me months to really get what he was saying.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how did you receive that? I guess.
It felt like a slap in the face. It felt like not that I felt entitled to working with him, but I was under the delusion that I was the leader that he needed. And he gave me some great advice. At that point he said, sometimes you got to be the carrot, sometimes you have to be the stick. Meaning, you can't always be the good cop. Sometimes you have to be the bad cop for people that you care about.
So he was asking for more bad cop from you.
Yeah. Or suggesting that I do that for others, but that it was too late with him. Which is a really, looking back, fortunate to have somebody who could communicate like that. And I've never forgot that conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, how has that changed, how has that helped pivot you for the future growth of your leadership?
The biggest is that whatever level or sense of entitlement to a position or affiliation with somebody that I had, and I can't exactly remember what that looked like.
Yeah.
I don't have it anymore. I mean, I'm really crystal clear that leadership is influence and making a difference in people's lives. And if you're not doing one of those two things, you're not leading. You might be managing them, but in my experience, management in this industry is nowhere near as long-lived as leadership.
Yeah, you'll get a guy for a summer, and then they move on.
Yeah.
Or they'll seek leadership. People are attracted by leadership.
Yeah. Well, they want to get something at least. If
Yeah.
it's not leadership, they'll look for something else.
Yep.
And maybe the something else is more money somewhere else. And it's sad because so many people aren't being exposed to great leadership, in my experience in this industry, because for some people it's come really easy.
Yeah.
10 years ago it was very different than it is today. Not to say it's been easy for people, but I think it's the market is evolving to become more complex and demand more systems and more intentionality and growth. Otherwise, it doesn't happen by accident.
That's what I was going to ask. So the question I would say is, knowing where you are now, rewinding back to that manager a year prior to you losing your best rep and your good friend.
Yeah.
What advice would you tell that guy?
Oh, yeah. I think, I don't know that I would have listened.
There's a difference between,
right?
Exactly. And I'm just saying, you're the coach speaking to yourself.
But if I would, the advice I'd give, it would be that. It'd be like, look, the guys you're working with, for sure, the amount of fraternization, like the amount of times that you choose to be a friend as opposed to a leader, because you can be both. But when you neglect leadership for comfort and friendship, you lose that relationship. You lose the relationship as their leader. You eat it away slowly, sometimes quickly, right?
Yeah.
But oftentimes, like at least for Nick and I, it was eroded slowly over time. I wasn't responsible or being responsible for his success. I wasn't making his success my business. It's like, we'll do it together, it'll happen or not. And that's probably what it felt like to him too.
Yeah, I think a common mistake that a lot of people make is they seek approval, because we all want this natural need of validation and approval, and it's like, I don't want him to feel bad, so I'm never going to tell him the truth, or I don't want to be looked as the bad guy, and we always are seeking the approval versus really what's needed. That honest conversation that Nick had with you was leadership.
Yeah.
The feedback he was willing to say, look.
That was growth and contribution, totally.
Exactly. So, kind of fast forward today, is there any other principles of leadership that you have developed over the last few years that you felt like have really attributed to your success?
There's a few. One of them for sure has been creating, and I know that I think I've heard of other. I think Ryan Roach and I talked about being responsible in one of your podcasts, but being responsible, fully responsible for people's experience and for the situations that they find themselves in, being responsible for somebody's success. that's made a huge difference for me. For example, if one of my senior managers, if I'm coaching or talking to them and there's been a breakdown, or they failed to hit a sales quota, or they failed in a recruiting area, or one of the recruits failed, like, my first go-to is to be responsible for it. Not to say that they had nothing to do with it, not to say that they couldn't have altered the entire reality, but to first look and discover, how is it that I am responsible? How is it that I could have helped this whole thing to be avoided? And that's offered some really great insights and pointing me in the direction of enhancements that I needed to make as a leader, enhancements that we needed to make as a company, or that the program needed to make, all sorts of different insights. But always first asking, like, how am I responsible, and where can I create power in resolving that this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, because I think a lot of the common go-to for most leaders is, I just don't have good sales reps, or I just can't recruit good people. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're really just blaming the fact that you can't take ownership and give them the.
And by the way, even if that's the case, because maybe it is for some people, you got to be responsible for that too. Yeah. You're not. I mean, if I was a victim of my first recruiting experience ever, I would recruit. A gal named Alyssa every year, and she'd quit every year. And that would be it.
Exactly.
Right? Or if it was just the way it was, that everybody I recruited would leave and go do something else. We've had 5 years of back-to-back growth in my organization, and growth is amazing, both as an individual and to experience it as a business, and even as a subset inside of a business. It feels amazing to make progress, but I didn't always make progress.
100%.
Yeah.
And people need to realize that, like, growth doesn't look like this; it looks like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So kind of one last kind of random question on leadership that I was curious.
Everybody wants to grow like Bitcoin,
Litecoin, baby. I'm just kidding.
It's Ripple now. That's the
new
hot
Ripple.
stuff.
Oh, dude,
Ripple,
I got it. It's
Stellar.
74 cents, baby.
Yes.
Love that. No, so the question I was going to ask was, like, what's a unique principle, or when it comes to strategy, or a system, like, that you found in leadership, like whether it's a certain conference call structure or a certain meeting structure?
I think there's so many right structures.
Yeah.
Structure is the key. Like, schedule is the key. Again, maybe it's a hallucination I have, but I oftentimes feel like when I'm putting in 40 and 50-hour weeks the last few years, like building myself and the business that I work inside of, and the teams and the people and all of that, like the 40 to 50 hours of intentional work. And for me, that it works in my life. I'm committed to that. If I don't have it scheduled out, it doesn't happen. Either the time doesn't happen, so 40 or 50 hours of intended work time turns into 30, or the actual scheduled events don't happen. Right? I don't get done what I'm supposed to. So for me, one of the best tools has been schedule. I mean, I look back the first time I was ever exposed to it when I was working doing that recruiting for books, 50 hours a week, and it was scheduled. It was required. You had to schedule your days to a half an hour period for the entire week.
Wow.
And I mean, it was like held your feet to the fire schedule, which is what I do for my guys now. It's taken me years to remember how effective that is, and to actually be willing to do it.
Yep.
And the first couple of years I'm talking about with, like, Nick, I didn't do that. I was very much just nonchalant, like expecting this business to just blow up in front of me because I got there at the right time, and that's not how it works. So, schedule for me now, one of the easiest ways to stop wasting time, I found the biggest waste of time is at nighttime. And if I'm going to talk about schedule, I'll maybe start first with right now. Yeah, during the we call it build season, but you've got your summer season, you got everything else. Recruiting maybe is what other people call it. But during that recruiting season, the build season, you still only have so many hours in a week. You still only have so many hours per day that you are going to be able to put into your business. I know that my last 3 to 5 hours at night are typically wasted if they're very late, right? Like the longer I stay up past midnight or towards midnight, the less effective I am, right?
Sleep is more effective than what you're probably
doing. And because if you go to bed at the right time, then you wake up at the right time, right? Oh, I can't wake. I just couldn't wake up at 7. That's because you went to bed at 2. So it starts with going to bed at the right time, waking up at the right time. Another required component is physical fitness and exercise. You got to be vital. You got to have energy. You need less sleep when you have energy. It's funny. You can actually exercise for free if you consider just the time commitment, because you can sleep less.
That's cool. I
exercise,
like that.
Yeah.
You can exercise for free.
Totally.
Because your energy makes it so you don't have to sleep as much.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That, for me, it's 8 hours of sleep if I'm not exercising, 7 hours of sleep if I am. It's almost like
science.
Yeah, science. So it's cool. But I use Google Calendars for everything. I've got it color coded. The moment I wake up, like, that's coded. And when I go to work, my drive time every single day, I drive into the office. It's been at 8. It's going to be at 7. So I come in at 7. I stay till 3. On Tuesdays, I've got a much longer day, but I do like 9 to 9 on Tuesdays. But inside of that 7 to 9 hours or 12 hours a day, I've got that chunked as well. So in any area by the previous Sunday that isn't designated, I actually do this on Friday and then I double check it on Sunday. But if it's not designated to be filled with something, then I'll create what I'm going to do in that moment. And a lot of times it just says creation because I'm doing videos or I'm doing a collateral or I'm working on projects or a website.
It was funny even trying to schedule the podcast. You're like, oh, I've got my creation moments. That I've got this and this. And it's like, he's like, well, I'm pretty open, but I'm really blocked out. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And now it makes a little bit more sense because a lot of times we, here, let me see this. So like, I'm going to speak to this for a second when we're speaking planners. So this is a DDD planner that I just built, and it's really designed for that. It's designed for, I use Google Calendar as well for coming to an events. But a lot of times we don't map out the battles that go in those blank moments. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that I have this project that I need to work on. It's not necessarily due today. It's due in a week. But are you relieving stress by properly planning out moments throughout the week to get it done instead of procrastinating it till the last moment, right? And it's those little moments that it's like, man, I got a free 30 minutes here. I'm not going to take phone calls because if I'm on phone calls, I'm not getting done this.
Yeah.
And speak to that for a second because that to me is
probably the most amazing thing when you create a schedule like this, and whatever your number is, 30 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours a week, 20 hours a week that you want to schedule out. And if you're in school, schedule that too. But if you were to schedule out 60 hours a week, let's say, or schedule out your entire week, including all your free time, schedule your free time. I'm not the only, there's many, many smarter people than me that are advocates for this.
Oh, it's huge.
You actually discover that you have a lot more free time than you realize, and you appreciate your free time more because you're present to it. It's like and the amount of time that we can kill on our phones and media and Facebook and whatever, it gets out of hand quickly if you're not tracking when that free time is supposed to be. And if I've got calls scheduled, what's funny is like the projects, I think it's called chunking. So when you chunk in an hour or 90 minutes to work on a project, some of the projects I'm working on they're 50-hour projects, 20-hour projects. I'm not going to try to sit down for 20 hours and blast it out.
Well, and a lot of people, that's what they do.
Yeah.
I mean, they think that that's effective, but it's like, really, are you being affected by 20-hour jam sesh when it's like...
And mainly people do 20-hour jam sessions because they procrastinated forever.
Exactly.
And they're not prepared.
100%.
And the reason they procrastinate is because they're doing other things that aren't as good of a use of their time.
Yep.
And when you schedule, just like when you budget, it just brings intentionality. So I use a coach. I've used professional coaches for a while now. If you're a leader in this industry, you ought to be using a professional coach.
Yeah. And that's like one of the things that we're starting in DDD is DDD coaching division, because we found that so many people think that their manager should be their coach. But there's a difference between, like, speak to that. There's a difference between I have a manager and I have a coach.
Yeah, so first off, even if I'll go back to it in a second. I was just going to talk about what I call and how I view a schedule, so I'll get back to that. But very few managers are trained to be coaches, even if that was their only job.
Yep.
Like, coaching is an actual art. It's a profession. I mean, people do it full time. And you look at sports, you look at business, you look at relationships, there's coaches. And their position is to stand, the way I would describe it is a coach sees you and stands for your greatness.
Yes.
When you can't see for it and when you don't have the strength to stand for it. And a capable coach, a great coach, can help you to discover it, help you to get connected to it, and typically help you to answer your own questions, because most coaches don't have better answers than you have. They just can help you to get to it.
They're really good question askers.
Yeah. And the thing about a good coach, at least one that's not involved directly in the business, is they don't have a dog in the fight. Like,
there's no
they just want you to win.
Yes. There's no desired outcome. There's no gain whether you do this or this.
And by the way, I try to bring that in my management and leadership position within the company, and I think it's one of the I think it allows you to create a very special relationship with your people when you're willing to be at least as objective as possible. It's not perfect. But
it's abundance versus scarcity leading. It's
totally.
Leading with like I have no intention.
No attachment.
No attachment, exactly.
Yeah, commitment to people's success, no attachment to it looking a certain way.
Yes.
I mean, and maybe it's different because I work with a lot of college students and interns, and then they graduate, but I'm thrilled when the guys or gals that I work with get a great job offer. I'm excited to write recommendations, and as long as doing this job serves them, they should do it.
Yeah.
When it stops serving them, they should stop doing it.
100%. And we see it in this industry so much, is a weak leader that's so scarce that he's like holding his little hen eggs. Mm-hmm. And it's two reasons. One, they're so driven by money and their own personal agenda.
Yeah.
And two, they have the inability to say, I can go replace.
Exactly. They can't duplicate.
They can't duplicate.
Because they're a leader some of them at least, are a leader by accident. They had enough of the right cousins and friends and brothers and classmates and, well, here's my business, and that doesn't last forever.
And so in order to be a 12-year veteran in the door-to-door space, you have to say, I'm sure you've lost great reps and they've been successful, and you got to be willing to grow. Keep going. I got to reset this real quick.
Okay.
So if you're on live and you know Peter and you're liking this, I think that's such a good principle. So go check yourself. Like, how abundant are you leading? Like, it's a good invitation. Sorry, go back to your schedule.
So the schedule thing. By the way, this is good. There's two schedule that I've seen that are like this. This reminds me of the only other schedule, I should say, scheduler that is similar but not the same, and that's Cardone's 10X planner. But this seems to be much more specific.
Yeah, it's super specific. It's
our business.
Yeah, it's like you have SHRED. You talked about, so SHRED stands for sleep, hydration, respiratory, exercise, and diet. So
Love
it's
it.
What are you doing? And we talked about sleep. And then sync. What are you doing to connect spiritually, connect the relationships and social skills? What are you doing? What book did you read today? What podcast? What are you doing to sharpen the saw? Like,
you listen to Audible, by the way?
Yeah,
Are you at multiple speed guy yet?
No, I haven't. I didn't even know I had that.
So 2X for all books now, and I started 2.5 this morning. So that was.
So you can just you can get through books faster.
And I actually can focus more too, because
really?
Like speed reading, you have to focus completely on it, otherwise you lose it.
Huh.
But like if I'm listening to single speed now, like standard speed on Audible, I get so bored.
That's how I am knocking. If I knock without a scooter, I get bored because I'm on double speed.
Yes.
I'm on 2X speed.
Yes, it's great. So you go 2X speed, get there. It's great. You can read twice as many books.
Oh, I love that.
It's good. No, what we refer to our schedule as, or what he refers to, what I call it now, it's a future existence system. Call it a schedule, fine. But really what you're doing is if you create a compelling future, something that's exciting, something that you want, something that you're supposedly committed to, it doesn't exist unless you take the actions required. Technically you got to get the results required, but you need to take the actions required at the very least to get the results to have a future, right? My capacity as a human being is limited. Like I've discovered how far I can go without a schedule. I discovered that about a year ago, and then since then I've been on a quest to discover how far I can go with a schedule.
That's
because
cool, like shifting the paradigm.
Without a schedule, you're limited. Like you can only keep 7 things on the top of your mind. There's been studies about that. So to try to remember all the things you're supposed to do and expect yourself to operate as efficiently within all those things, it's ludicrous. So the schedule is a system where you capture the events or the actions needed to create your future. And if you don't capture the events and then use the system to manage the events, you're not going to have a future. So it's a cool concept.
Nugget. Thumbs up. I will like that. Right.
Future existence system.
So deep.
That's what it is. Without it, it's impossible. So that's my big.
Should I change the name of this to like the future existence system planner? Like that's money, dude. That's good.
Yeah, it's that was the biggest shift for me. And that was even 6-7 months ago. It was right after I started working with my new coach that we talked about this, and I realized I'm like, yeah, I get it. I want more. I know I'm capable of more, and I keep coming up against this thing. And then, oh yeah, what's the bottleneck? What's the thing that's stopping me? The biggest one thing that if it changed, everything would start to shift. And I'm like, oh yeah, my capacity to create my future and operate inside of that schedule.
Yep.
So
intentional schedule. Yeah. Like I love that.
And I'm more effective, and I get to create more and everything else.
Okay, so for time's sake, I want to shift to the last thing, and I want to have some time for that.
Yes.
I could dude. I think at the end of the day, like the most successful people, I'm finding there's like common threads in all these podcasts.
Yeah.
It's those that can dial in their schedule and be super productive with their time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's just a simple principle, but like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, that's how you win.
Yeah.
Is exactly what you just said. That's how you win. I ask top reps, what makes you top rep? I just more efficient and work more hours.
Yeah.
Like, pretty simple. Like,
And probably even more important than that is that's where you actually experience fulfillment. Because when you're doing anything less than that, you know you left it on the table.
yeah, at the end of the day, you don't want to look back on the day and be like, well, technically, I didn't really work hard. Yeah, you want to tell your wife, like, technically, I didn't really work hard, so that's why we're broke. Or technically, like, you know what I mean? It's like, that's not fulfilling.
To segue into the last thing I think we're going to talk about, I mean, that's really perfect. Like, there are a lot of super talented people that they look good, but they could be great. Or they look average, but they should be good, or they could be
100%.
good. And like, that's the thing that I got most passion for back when I sold books was that direct sales is an amazing vehicle to develop yourself inside of, right? I tell the guys I work with and individuals I'm recruiting and that we're interviewing, it's a brilliant metaphor for life. I mean,
It's deep.
it is. Like, you look at the no, yes. You look at the work and the perseverance over time and the grit. I mean, the things that business icons and sports, legends talk about, that's this job. There's very few careers or even short-term bursts of careers that give you that type of training ground.
It makes me think of the Michael Jordan quote. It's like, I get so much recognition for how many shots I made, but nobody counts the shots I missed.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I missed way more shots than I made.
And in the business world, I think in sports there's this big opportunity in elementary, middle, and high school to experience, in college for some to experience that type of environment.
Yep.
And then when you get into the business world, it's not the same. I mean, to get into a leadership position where you can learn to influence others in a very tangibly, like, trackable way,
Yes.
that could take 10 years in a standard business.
Yeah,
It
it's
could
kinda
take
like
2
I got
years here.
promoted to manager after my 10th year
Yeah.
at this company,
Yeah.
and now I finally have 2 guys under me.
And you're working, and the people you're working with, they got the 10-year management track too.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's
you give me the 2-year, the guy who wants it in 3 years, who's like got rocket fuel, behind him, and he wants it, and he's going to work for it, and now you've got to fulfill a leadership role for that guy, and it creates opportunities to really challenge and develop yourself.
Well, it makes me think of, like, my first year co-managing I want to say 22, had 8 guys, part of my organization, and I'm 22, leading all my buddies, and I look back at that, and it's like, everybody asked me, like, my production doubled. My income went from 80 to 300 grand that year, and it was like, what was the difference? Everybody asked, like, whoa, what happened? Why'd you go from 160 to 300 sales that year?
Yeah.
And it was like, I was forced into a position of leadership that I had this accountability and I had this responsibility I felt to my people.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a fast track to, like, growing up.
Yeah. It is. And I mean, it's you learn how to be a better leader, which influences your ability to be a good parent and a great spouse and a great friend. And if you do this job the right way, and the challenge is that there's a lot of easy way out. There's a lot of ways to be lazy and still look successful, especially for the super talented. I mean, some of the most talented people I've worked with have not been the most successful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much talent you have, it matters what you demonstrate.
Here's an interesting quote that aligns. It's that quote, I don't know who said it, but it's like, the key to success is getting enough people where they need to get. By you helping be the catalyst to getting people where they need to be, that's how you become more and more successful. Yeah. And I think that's the principle of leadership, that it's like, that's the success. When you watch guys develop and be able to coach, like,
Mm-hmm.
Like the difference between a manager and a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody that can lead and influence versus just kind of be in the position out of default. Like, I think that's something that is such a lifelong thing. Like,
But whatever the position is, being in any position out of in default mode it just wastes your life. I mean, you never know. You don't. I'm 33 now, and you don't have to get that much older to start losing people that you love and have friends disappear around you. And, like, you realize that time is short. And if you're going to invest time into a business that is this challenging, and challenge is a gift to grow yourself inside, right? Use it for what it is. You've got, maybe you're doing this for 1 season, or maybe it's 4 years, or maybe you're going to make a career run at it. I don't care if the guys I'm working with are looking at this like a 2-year or a 10-year opportunity. I just care that they play full out, because at least I know when they're done, they're never going to regret the time or the energy that they spent here, because it is such a good training ground. But only if you're using it for that. Because there's a lot of other people that look at it a different way. I'm going to tell a quick story that I don't know if we're going over time, but I'll usually tell this when I train. I love this story, and I don't remember where I heard it first. I heard it in a book last year, and I don't know if that's where I got it, but the story is about a traveler who's walking through Central Europe a few hundred years ago. And as he's walking down the path, he sees somebody working on what looks to be like this rock wall. And the guy's putting these rocks up, and it looks like he's doing some masonry work, and he's grunting and kind of spitting, and the man's got some water. The traveler's got water. He walks up to the man and says, "Excuse me," and the guy turns around and he's like, "What do you want?" And the traveler said, "Hey, I was curious what you're doing, and I have some water." And the guy says, "I'm working. Leave me alone. I'll take some water." And he drinks the water and throws it back at him, and the guy says, "Have a good day." He's like, "Yeah, right," and he keeps working. And the traveler walks a little bit longer, and he looks on the side of the road, and it's kind of the same wall. There's another guy working. And he's got some more water in his pouch, so he figures he'd walk up with his canteen and says, "Excuse me." The guy turns around and he's like, "Yeah, I'm kind of busy right now." And the traveler says, "Just curious what you're doing, and I've got some water if you want it." The guy said, "Yeah, I've got to work until 5, then I get to go home and see the family, like a couple more hours, then I'm done." Loves some water, drinks it, gives it back to him. Traveler says, "Have a good day." He says, "Sounds good." Keeps walking. And then he gets to the end of this wall, and it's like a corner, and there's another guy working, and as he approaches him, he hears whistling. And this guy's sweating profusely down his back, and he's got blood on his fingertips, and the traveler walks up to him, and he just looks at him. He's like, "Excuse me." The guy turns around, big smile on his face. The traveler says, "What are you doing?" "I got some water. Do you want some?" The man says, "I'd love some water. We are building the most magnificent chapel in all of Central Europe." The guy gives him the water. They part ways. Same, 3 people doing the same job. Same exact job.
Yeah.
3 totally different experiences. And the thing is, not only does the third guy enjoy it more, and not only does he get more fulfillment, but if one of those 3 is going to become an artisan worth, writing about in the history books, like, it's going to be the third guy. Because he's doing it with intentionality and passion. He's finding a reason to do this hard, arduous task for the benefit of others, for the benefit of his family, for his life, as opposed to, just going to work, having to do it, being a slave.
I just knocked doors, like...
Totally. That's actually more of like B. The A's actually quit usually, but the B's, too many people are stuck in that. Like, and you just miss this opportunity to challenge and grow and develop yourself in whatever capacity your leadership or your position is right now.
So what advice would you give somebody that's almost stuck in the mindset of B?
Of B.
Remember, like what would you tell them? It's like,
first you have to recognize it. I mean, that you got to recognize it, and then you have. I feel like it's just a cliche, but the question is, if you're not going to start playing full out now, when are you going to start? When is there going to be a better time? There's not, right? And if you can play full out, doing one of the hardest jobs that I've experienced, and that most of us who've done this and done other things, and you look at anybody from like Mark Cuban to Tony Robbins, and all sorts of these. There's big names that have knocked on doors, and they'll assert that it's an incredible vehicle to train yourself in sales and business. And if you could throw yourself into that with 100% now, and the rest of life becomes a little bit easier and simpler, think how good you do that.
Yes.
Like establish it now.
Not good.
It's like guys that have a hard time loving their job, or it's a fallacy. I don't believe that loving your job or doing what you love is nearly as important or valuable in life as finding a way to love what you do. You don't do what you love what you do.
Amen. It's like...
Otherwise you're a victim.
You're a victim. That's the best way to put it. It's like you become this like victim to circumstance.
And it doesn't end with work.
Yeah, it doesn't. So shifting, guys, like if you're watching this, like maybe take some time to recognize, where are you on the wall? Really?
Yeah.
Are you on the A, like, I hate my life? Are you at the B? Or are you at the C that's like sitting there reflecting on, man, what a cool chapel we're about to build. Like, what a cool legacy we're creating. What a cool story to tell my future kids that, are like, what do you do to like help slingshot our family to success? Like, you know what I mean? Like, looking at the big picture and the wins of what we get in this job. Like, I think so many people, at Door to Door Con, I have a shirt, and I think it's all about just creating more unity and culture and honor to what we do. And it's just a simple shirt that it says, "I knock doors." And it's deep in the sense of, so many people would wear that shirt and so many people would keep it in the closet and say, I never want to show anybody this.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows, I think a lot of it has to do, and I'm going to give it to everybody, but I'm curious to see who's the person that's going to hang it in the closet and get dust on it, simply because they're afraid to walk around saying, I knock doors.
Yeah.
And it shows a lot about who they are
Mm-hmm.
and their attitude towards the job.
Yeah. It's funny. My wife and I were talking about over the New Year's, or maybe it's Christmas, because we're doing some traveling. We've taken trips this year more than ever. It's been really amazing, and I've worked really hard to get to a place where we have the flexibility and freedom to do that and means. And we were talking about our friends that, like, during college and after college, they would talk to, like, her friends would talk to her, and they'd be like, how do you guys do that? Like, travel? You guys travel for the summer, and he leaves, and then he's working, and like, you guys travel. You don't have a house. Like, you rent 6 to 8 months at a time, and then you're gone for 4 months, and then you just come home for a couple months, and there's no stability. And like, how do you do that? And then what's funny is they ask the same question now, but now it's like, how do you do that?
Yeah,
because
like,
we're traveling, and we've got, like, it's just it's amazing. The opportunity, if you want it, and it's not bad if you don't, but for those that think it's in the cards, apply yourself now and get there quicker, because it is, it's such an amazing industry to be a part of.
It really is,
yeah.
And we need to like look in the mirror every day and say that to ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, I wake up in the morning going, what a blessing I am in this industry.
Yeah.
Like, where would I be if I didn't have this?
And I'm not talking specifically about alarms and smart home, and I'm particularly passionate about the product and the difference it can make in people's lives, but anything in direct sales,
yeah.
I mean, and you talk to everybody, like, it's the best product that we have as organizations is not the thing that our customers get to play with or put on the roof. It's the program and the position and the opportunity to grow inside of the company. That's the best product we have to offer.
Amen.
And the best companies realize that and do something about it the most, too.
Yeah. Dude, love it. Okay, so we're out of time, and if you're on this Facebook, in that last 5 minutes of this, if you did not at least break down in tears once, I'm ashamed of you. And 2, I almost got like choked up and emotional. Like, I really did. Like, because it's kind of like, you reflect on the last 12 years, or, for me, since I was 11, that's all I've done. Mm-hmm. And everybody asks, when are you going to get a real job? And I'm like, I have a freaking real job. Like, and I love it. Yeah. And I think the more we can embody that, like, if there's anything to take away from any of the podcasts that I've done ever, would be that. It really would. It's just like, own it. So, dude, I've appreciated this. Like, this has been fun. This has been fun.
So, we'll go deep quick here.
Yeah, hashtag DDD podcast. Share this with somebody that needs it. Tag somebody that maybe it's like fast forward to like minute 30 and be like, wake up. Like, wake up. Show this to your rep. If you're a manager and you're like, please, like, grow up in this industry, like, this is where this would be a huge impact to anybody like that's listening to this. And I think a lot of people probably phase out after the first 3 minutes of watching this. So I hope.
Sorry, we're boring for the first 20.
No, the first was good. The first was good, but I'm talking like I almost got emotional the last 5. So if you're watching this still and you're on the live, like, tag somebody that's like and say start at minute 40 if you really only have 5 minutes to watch. If not, like, watch the whole freaking thing or listen to the whole thing. But like at the end of the day, like, that is the core to what we do. Mm-hmm. So love you guys. Share some love. Peter,
thank you.
He's the man. Okay, let's go.